So was this a, you guys met about, this one?
Mm-hmm.
Was that helpful to?
Yeah, it was good.
How neat.
Actually, it was this one.
That's where she was. Yeah, Peapie was grandmother.
Okay, oh. Yes, yeah. Yeah.
Playing Peapie.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
We have the
You were
distinction.
too rowdy? I thought that they called them the rowdies.
Gas station.
Oh, you weren't rowdy enough. Maybe that.
Maybe that was it. We went.
Yeah, a certain minimum rowdiness.
That's
but-
what the,
I got you. You did. You
we.
didn't paint yourself blue and white.
Yeah, maybe that was
was
it.
it.
Not yet.
Mm.
We
It's
went
a-
over for Brian.
It's a big property.
We went over
It's
to
a-
do
it's
for
a
Brian
shame
to
is
talk to the track
entrance and
coach.
exit out of it is still
And so we had our meeting
Even
with
when
the
you
track
take it
coach,
to
and he said,
either side
they're
of the
practicing,
property,
just
it's
go
so-
on in there
so
and
close
watch.
to that
Just so how
intersection.
how the mic and
Yeah.
Even if you're down at the fire station.
So we went in,
Yeah.
and we were up in the balcony,
Yeah.
and we were just kind of standing there,
It's just
and all of a
tough
sudden,
intersection, the entire.
down on the
of it is
floor,
just-
Mike Krzyzewski
On
pointed
either
at
side,
us.
like, where Rick Terry's
Just
is
wave.
across the way. That's, and that,
And with
and they, I'm
that,
sure they
about-
lost a lot of parking
with
lot
that
when they,
small.
expanded
with
that
that,
road.
about
It's been
3
so long
people
since so I don't know what it really looks like.
started towards us.
That's a terrible.
And we were up in
parking lot,
the
too.
second row,
Yeah.
second level.
And it's a tight getting in
so
and out of
they
there.
evidently started up one way, and we started down another.
Do you ever
Yeah.
read the,
Practices are closed.
press, in the press talk this week?
So I've got a
In this
friend
week, no.
that lives, that's
Some
from Morristown.
idiot wrote in
lives
about
Texas
this
now.
apartment complex that's coming in
Evidently.
Grigsby Chapel and how we don't
Maybe the ESPN.
Yeah. maybe.
anything. And
Or
just
North
awful.
Carolina, maybe.
The editor wrote a note at
But
this hasn't, it
I got
hasn't
this
shown up
friend,
on
his
anybody's,
husband did his
basically
medical
hasn't
residency.
shown up on an
in Duke,
agenda
and
yet
he,
for anyone to discuss.
was orthopedist, and they had to take
Or
turns
just,
sitting on the bench with
I
the
mean, I
team
know
in
it's
case
hard to,
something happened.
when you're not,
And
I remember when I
their
came here
son
to talk about
still
Everett Road,
tells
I
everybody
wasn't
he
quite sure
sees.
how the town
My
worked.
mother has a friend that got thrown
got
out
that
of
thrown.
It was really nice. All you gotta do is make a phone call.
I told her, I said, let
She
him
met with me
expand on that a little bit.
Came to these meetings. It would be helpful if there
But
was a way to, you know,
I've got-
that Farragut intro to town
I
affairs.
think I
They should
should get
have
a bucket list item
class
marked off
on
my
how
thing.
the town.
We're actually going to
Well, the town,
Furman
and
of
the
all
intro to Farragut
places.
class, they do have people that
Plays,
sign up for it. But and those are the people that are
plays
interested.
Duke.
At that very, at least
Plays
in
Duke
that
basketball.
regard. And people get interested
Furman
when they,
does.
like
So
these people that
Brian
are
has
talking about the
tickets.
apartment complex. I was
And,
talking to,
we're gonna
yeah.
go.
but she, I was
And I've
talking to her
seen
about it.
Duke
She's
play
like, it
a
is
few
really kind
times,
of very
but I've never
interesting
seen
how,
him play in
how the
camp.
town works.
So I'm
And I s-
excited about
you,
that.
the
Well, it's
thing
not
is, you're
very
gonna
big.
get here, cause she's involved in the neighborhood, you're gonna get
Not
here.
very big.
No,
You're gonna be kinda hooked.
Oh, wow.
Cause you're gonna realize how.
but we,
There's high school gyms in.
So, I think that's.
oh, yeah, well, yeah.
They assume
one
it's
in
government,
Morristown
they're
High
just
School
gonna
was
get
bigger than
a
that.
ration of crap from whoever
We've
they
been in
talk to
the,
that's stonewalled.
we've been in there 3 times. Once we got thrown out, and then, the law school graduation was in there, and both
West
Holly and
End.
Brian went through graduation there, so.
Mhm.
We, made a whole bunch
Yeah.
of pictures, not
Yeah.
so much of
Well,
graduation,
yeah.
but of
No,
camera.
He needs to, he knows it needs to be updating,
That's good.
yeah, so it would be wise to.
Memorial Coliseum.
Where,
That's Georgia Tech.
oh, Georgia Tech. Brian has been several
They've
times.
just remodeled it here recently, but
Okay,
well, they
that's
did
how-
some interesting. They actually
Yeah.
dug it deeper.
Yeah, only an engineering school would.
It was just,
About a year.
but it's kind of interesting. You show how things
Yeah.
have changed. When I was at school.
It's amazing what,
we
you
had
look at the old
big
Ingles
museum.
building, they just
Yeah.
painted the
I mean,
shingles
that and
off
our-
white as opposed to that brown.
And they had
It made a
room
world of
quarters.
difference, just
Yeah.
painting.
You had take 6
They
quarters
need to
of PE,
update.
freshman, sophomore.
It's just, yeah.
And they had like only about
What
8
was I,
times the
oh,
select front.
paper
So,
mill, you know that.
Well, not
where
what
that
you wanna
Knox
take,
warehouse
when were you gonna
was?
take it, you know? So-
Wholesale warehouse used to be,
I can't-
they've updated that whole.
Sophomore, freshman,
Yes.
fall.
That
That was
looks
good
really
basketball.
good there, and actually, that is
My
a great
PE coach
location, cause it
was
is
the head
easy to
basketball
kind of get
Oh
in
my
and out.
gosh.
God, can you imagine Krzyzewski teaching PE
Krzyzewski.
or
Or
one of
even Bobby,
any of these?
or even Bobby Crumb.
Oh, any of, oh yeah, I mean, any of these coaches at level, Division I, coaching PE at the same time.
Yeah.
Had track.
Yeah.
The head track coach was the PE.
We were at Hilton Head this
Brian
fall
will
break.
love that.
Oh.
Brian
And we
will
went,
love
I don't know
that.
if you've
White
ever
Powder was the
have an area called
basketball
Harbortown,
coach. Yeah.
which is like
After
a,
the Essex.
it is kind of what they're looking for.
Rack
It's
Hider.
shops, but there's apartments above it and everything. But the
He was
parking,
there for years, but
they have parking everywhere. So it's one of those things
Well,
that
Brian
And
will
I came
love
home for
that.
Thanksgiving.
you have to figure out, what do you need?
While I was home Thanksgiving, I
Because you're
ended
not
up
gonna just
having
be
appendicitis and
supported by the
a couple
people
more
that are-
were Maryland.
Oh, yeah.
An appendectomy. So I was literally out of school for a week and then went back. I had
Yeah.
1 week of PE and finals when I got back. And so he didn't make me take phys ed. I helped him. I carried his clipboard around and called roll and.
I saw 11.
But we really were playing in a facility.
Yeah. These
Connected to
first,
Oh,
the
the
field
fields.
house. It was just like the practice court and stuff
Yeah.
like that. That's where we had phys ed.
Wow.
pretty quickly, we've pretty
Had
much
swimming
talked
coach,
all
he
that
taught
out.
phys
Well,
ed.
my goodness. That's, I mean,
That's back then, you earned your keep.
yeah.
No, it was multi-million-dollar contract. Bobby Dodd was the athletic director there.
Yeah.
And football coach.
Yes. Yeah,
Both.
yes. Oh, I can't wait. I cannot wait for
Yeah.
that to come in.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
He was only the third football
That's been in the making for
Yeah.
They had John Heisman.
2 years now. Yeah.
And then a guy named William Alexander. Bobby Dodd.
Living in the town.
It's 7, according to your.
2000
I'd say we're good to go.
2008. But we lived here
Eventually
from
for sure.
92
So,
to 2000.
Yeah,
702.
but,
We
we're late.
lived closer.
Want to call the October the 16th, 2014 meeting of the Farragut Municipal Planning Commission to order, please. We'll start off with citizens forum. Do we have anyone in the audience that has a question or comment that does not relate to an item on the agenda? And do we have some Boy Scouts with us tonight? If you would, if all the scouts would come up and just give us your name and tell us your troop number and what badge you're working on. Just come up to the microphone up here at the podium.
My name is Patrick Wingard. We're all from Troop 46. I'm working on communications and citizenship in the community.
Thank you.
I'm Davis Somerville, and I'm in Troop 46 also. I'm working on citizenship in the community and communications.
Zach Caudill, and I am just working on communications.
Okay, thank you all
Thank
for
you.
coming tonight. We'll move on to the approval of the minutes, September the 18th, 2014 minutes. Did we have any changes or comments?
Like to offer a motion for approval?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Start out item number 3, discussion of a request for a minor amendment to the 2012 Comprehensive Land Use Plan to update the open space cluster residential portion of the future land use plan to include multifamily. PMG applicant.
Yes, ma'am. This item came about as a part of last month's meeting when we were talking about the rezoning of the property on North Campbell Station Road to the R6 OSMFR zoning that is located at 820 North Campbell Station. Knowing that we would have to do a minor amendment to the comprehensive land use plan as it relates to the new zoning district that has been created, being the open space multifamily overlay. That overlay did not exist when the CLUP was adopted, as we discussed last time. And with the recent adoption of that zone, this would now afford for that to be captured within the comprehensive land use plan. primarily on page 32 and 35. On 32, we would recommend incorporating language that states determined by environmental constraints and surrounding built environment, the density ranging from very low to medium density residential land uses, and then on 35, accounting for it in the existing zone columns. These both are consistent with the comprehensive plan and the strategic plan, and staff would recommend your all's approval, certainly, of the minor amendment as proposed.
Do we have any questions or comments?
Move for approval of the
Second.
proposed wording.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item number 4, discussion and public hearing on a request to annex parcel 108, tax map 130, 902 North Campbell Station Road, 1.55 acres. Clarence and Enzel Lee, owners, PMG applicant. I'm changing the name of that company.
No. This also came about, we discussed it last month's meeting. There's an 1.5-acre tract that sits just to the north of the larger 33-acre tract that's currently in the town. And to create consistency between jurisdictions of review, we have received a petition of annexation from the property owner to pursue annexation of the 1.5 acres into the town. So before you tonight is the plan of service in the resolution format and the ordinance recommending for the annexation. This tract is within the town's urban growth boundary, which is key. Pardon me. We'll go through, depending on the action tonight, we'll go through a lengthy waiting public notice period of the plan of service. There is a 30-day requirement that it be posted prior to public hearing. And then it'll be forwarded after final reading to the county mayor's office too. So based on it being within the urban growth boundary and petitioned by the property owner, and also with the overall development being now based on the amendment that you all just approved, consistent with the comprehensive land use plan and the strategic plan, we would recommend approval of resolution 1409 being the plan of services, and ordinance 1414 related to the annexation of the property.
And we can do these both with one.
They're attachments to each other.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Any questions or comments?
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Campbell Station Road, if we annex that property, how much of Campbell Station Road would become part of our responsibility, that portion?
That is already, I'm looking. Is already within the town and our
Okay.
responsibility.
All right, so that Campbell Station Road up until the town of Farragut limit.
Probably Ridgeland. I think we go up to Ridgeland right now, don't we?
Yes.
Mark?
Okay. All right, I was just curious. Okay.
I just have one question. It probably doesn't make any difference, but I noticed this is referred to as a Lee property, but Ms. Wellens applied for the annexation.
Ms. Wellens Ms. Wellens oversees the estate for the Lee property, and our understanding is she has the legal authority to sign the document.
This is her parents, I think, the Lees.
Lee's her maiden name, I think.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any more questions or comment? Anyone in the audience? Have a motion?
I move to approve recommending the approval of the resolution and recommend approval of the ordinance.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So where does this go next now?
This will now go to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen.
Item number 5, discussion and public hearing on a request to rezone parcel 108 and 109, tax map 130, 820, and 902 North Campbell Station Road, north of the Holiday Inn Express, 34.5 acres, from A to R-1 to R-6 OSMFR, PMG applicant.
Yes, ma'am.
A lot of letters there.
That's true. That's true. Again, this was the item that was before you last month to rezone the larger 33-acre tract that is currently within the town of Farragut to the new to the revised R6 and the new open space overlay related to multifamily. If you'll remember last month, it was deferred for 2 reasons: traffic impact study, which the summary report is within your packet, and then also the minor amendment to the comprehensive land use plan being one of the previous items this evening. Excuse me. You know, in our packet, we also mentioned the annexation, which you all just voted on in the plan of services. Within your packet is this executive summary of the traffic impact study. There are some preliminary conclusions that the traffic generated for the proposed apartment development will not result in unacceptable levels of service on North Campbell Station. There are 3 recommendations that are listed there in the executive summary and would be supported by town staff. Excuse me. Again, due to the creation of the new OSMFR district would allow now for this property to be rezoned, and staff would recommend for approval of resolution PC 1410 and ordinance 1416.
Does anyone have any questions?
Is there any way that we could capture that acre and a half in this so that applicant wouldn't have to come back and rezone that little acre and a half we're getting ready to annex?
Within the annexation ordinance, it is going to be brought in. It's recommended that at that time when it is brought into the town.
Bring it in as R6 OMS?
Yes, sir.
FR.
So they
Okay.
wouldn't have to go
Okay.
through a separate rezoning process of that acre and a half.
Great.
Good question.
Anyone else? Applicant having questions or comments?
Hello, my name's Mark Bollick. My office at 1313 Calmia Road, Knoxville, Tennessee. I'm the civil engineer on the project, and we just want to let you know that the developer and I have looked through and reviewed through the traffic impact study, and we have no problems meeting all the requirements that are listed in the executive summary. We understand it, and actually it's less than we anticipated it was going to be.
So you plan to incorporate number 2, which is the right turn in?
Yes. Yes.
Any other questions?
I have a quick question. Just this property that they're adding, that we're going to annex in, that's not officially done yet. Does this prevent them in any way of using the other part of, getting this going?
It does not.
Okay.
Because the 33 acres are currently in the town and they're already in the process of rezoning that process. These 2 applications will kind of run concurrently, with the rezoning of the larger 33-acre tract probably finishing up about a month and a half prior to an annexation finishing,
Okay.
because of the waiting periods related to annexation set forth in state law.
I have a question in regards to that.
Sure.
That if we are working currently on trying to put together, assuming that this gets rezoned tonight, to put together a packet for December's meeting for site development.
Mm-hmm.
Is that too early to do that? And that's incorporating the 1.5 acres? Or could we do that and have it subject to?
That's a good question, Mark.
Only issue I see is the board mayor and alderman are only meeting one time in November and one time in December.
And then the
You're gonna need
ordinance
2
for
meetings.
annexation will not take effect until 30 days after that December meeting. So, I would almost think, are you looking just to submit a concept initially, or
Full
Full
site,
full
civil
site
package?
full
plan?
civil package, full site development package.
I would think the annexation would need to be complete prior to submittal.
That means we'd be held off until December submittal for a January meeting.
Yes.
Could they submit and then we could hold the well, you got to do public notification on that.
I mean, that's a little wrinkle that we didn't anticipate, so
Sure.
we're wanting to get started.
And it's all because, and it's not really because of the BOMA meeting schedule, it's the notification periods that are being set forth and the timelines being set forth as it relates to annexation, is really what the delay process is.
I have it all set up, ready to go.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask this question, along that same lines. Could we go for a site development permit and also maybe with the possibility of starting the land clearing or ground clear, start moving the dirt and the trees, start moving stuff around, not doing any buildings? I mean, is that something we can all work out?
What you could do is what they did in Parkside Drive is just apply for a land disturbance permit so that you could at least get started with some grading that would have to be done regardless of what happens with the annexation. I don't foresee any problems with the annexation personally, but you never know. You just need to obviously design it assuming that it would be annexed into the town, I think, and we could probably, I mean, it would be good to, on a project like that, to review it at the conceptual plan review stage first, and then maybe that as part of your land disturbance permit, and you could do that through the planning commission in December.
That way you go and submit your civil package, solicit comments, and then, assuming the annexation was done, then you could be heard. Is that right, Mark? But at least that wouldn't hold up submittal
Yeah, at
and,
least they
and
could-
some, and a review.
Could get some things moving forward.
Right.
Pending that.
It'll be a pretty big submittal, so
Yeah.
I wouldn't hurt you guys to have a little extra, more time to
Yes.
digest it.
It will be, and it would probably be something that we would want to look at, like a concept plan first, and then, as maybe part of your land disturbance plan. It would be more conceptual, but to allow them to go ahead and do some limited, thinning out of vegetation and things.
Ultimately, that should save the applicant some money in the event there were some tweaks and changes, instead of going through and doing all your hydrology and your road design and all that.
Yeah. Yeah. I would recommend that, yes.
Mark, how do you feel? Is that do you understand?
I understand what you're saying. It's just throwing a timeline change in that we weren't anticipating, that's all. But
You're still gonna be able to submit.
I'll let the developer ask. He's got a question.
Jason Perry, 564 Law Street Lane, Knoxville, Tennessee. Mark, let me just say, if you have a ground disturbance permit on the 33 acres, I mean, obviously, if it's not annexed, so you still have two separate parcels, so let's just say we do run into an issue on annexation, we could still, issue a ground disturbance permit on the 33 acres that are in the town, correct? Because the bulk of the works and the bulk of the cut and the fill work is obviously on the 33 acres. I mean, and the majority of that acre and a half is going to be used, and a lot of it will be eaten up in road work, just preliminary or
Probably construction staging, really.
Yeah, I mean,
It's pretty flat as it is today.
yeah, but a lot of it's going to be eaten up because when you add that, obviously the frontage that was mentioned earlier about how much is actually, we're going to make the decel and the excel lanes. You're going to eat up a lot of that frontage coming into the property. We'll keep that on our property, but basically what you have is, since you have two separate parcels, anyway, and they're not, at this point, was the way we have to look at it. One of them's in Knox County. Obviously, we're not going to go to Knox County if we don't have to. We're going to annex it. But that being said, the town of Farragut would still have the ability to issue a ground disturbance permit, and we could move forward in doing dirt work. I mean, you see what I'm saying? And that would give you the 30 days. I mean, if we're not, let's just be honest. I mean, we're not going to, there's not a bunch of stuff we're going to get done in January on,
I think what Mark's saying is, I think he would like for this body to be able to see that conceptual plan, to see your site layout, before you guys spend a whole lot of time clearing and grubbing, and especially cut and fill. I would think just the conceptual design we're going to want to take a look at it.
Yeah, and you're going to get all of that. No, you'll get all of that no matter what. We're going to submit the whole package, and how we have to, and this may be the best. We're going to submit everything and how we have to break it. And let's just, for some reason, annexation's not approved. All right, then we have to go to Knox County. Okay, we just, I don't think we're going to have a lot of problem if we had to go getting zoned out of Knox County to put at this point, what sits there is the clubhouse and the pool, and that's it. There's really no residency buildings there. So, you know, that, I don't think that's going to be an issue. So really what we're looking at here from a timing standpoint, Mark, and you probably agree, we may not run anything. Really what you're going to look at is the issuances of a ground disturbance permit in our minds would be more from a financing mechanism as far as the lender goes, being able to issue that permit. If we have a ground disturbance permit issued, we can close the debt portion of the project. And that's really what, you know, in these types of projects, you know, would probably be a loan for 20 some odd $20 million. So that's really what the importance of probably timing for us would be, as when we can close that loan. We'd rather close it in January, just from the simple standpoint of getting up and getting moving. You know, that's it. So, but I don't think it's going to I don't really think
The only thing
out in the wash.
If I were in your shoes, the only thing that would give me heartburn is if you prepared that entire civil package and there were some designs that were promulgated out of this commission, some design changes, may not be any.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, you guys are going back and doing a lot of refiguring civil engineering time. And my thought is the quicker that you guys can get a conceptual plan in here, maybe with also a grading plan, I think is kind of important on that side. The quicker you guys can get those two things in front of this body, I think the quicker we can get you up and going on your grading disturbance permit.
Yeah, it's really just a time frame for you. We'll get it to you. We'll get it worked out. It's not really. I think and I agree with you. I think we're getting a little bit too far. You know, I think we're adding a little bit too much weight into some. But I think it'll work itself out in time frame. Exactly.
I'm not concerned
right.
about the annexation. I think we'll get through that pretty
agreed.
easy. But I would be as complicated as a site, and
Sure.
it is complicated. It's not a little, it's not a freestanding drive-through restaurant. And so my thought would be is to save you guys some time and money.
Yeah.
Is to try to get a conceptual design. I think in grading, a grading plan would be more important or as important as the conceptual design.
Yeah, that's fine. Sure. Yeah, no issues whatsoever. Yeah, I think we're fine.
Mark, are we missing anything? Or are we giving them some guidance, or are we just muddying things up?
I would suggest that perhaps you all just kind of huddle and work out a timeline of what some interim deliverables could be, and so everybody's on the same sheet of music relative to the calendar and the dates and what is doable within that framework, and then.
I clearly think they need a concept, like Noah said, of just generally what they're wanting to do and present that to you all. Maybe some limited land disturbance, just like we did with Parkside Drive.
Right.
And that way they haven't invested too much in something that may clearly not work, because there's some real clear criteria in that overlay zoning district that deals with protecting, areas
sensitive areas
on that property, and we need to.
I think you lay out those activities so everybody's talking the same thing, and then you can present that part and show where you're at when you come back to us, and we can see how this is unfolding. And
I think that
everybody will be on the same comfort level.
Mark Bialik, there's a deadline on Monday. I mean, it's possible that we could look at your conceptual design, or at least get you some feedback from this commission as quickly as November. If you could hit that Monday, which is only 3 or 4 days from now. But maybe it sounds like you guys know where the clubhouse is going. You may already have a lot of this work done.
We have, honestly, in the last 3 weekends, I have redrawn this site at least 7 times. And, but we have a concept layout that we could provide on Monday. I do not have a grading plan associated with it, but I know where we're proposing to put retaining walls, and I could show that and the impacts of it and where it is in relationship, in dimensions and
I think that would go a long way in getting this body introduced to your plan and making, at a minimum, making that December meeting a lot easier.
Well, that, and like you're saying, if we submitted that this coming Monday with the appropriate documentation, just that plan, Mark, would that be enough to start the conversation so that we could have, by November deadline for December's meeting, a full site development package? That way, we'd still be pushing it a little bit, but
the only thing you'd be waiting then would be the annexation. And so if you guys don't mind waiting around for that, but that would definitely, that's going to help your process, probably save you a month in there if there were some tweaks and changes.
That's what I'm thinking also.
Yeah.
And really, I think the question for as long as you all are fine of us submitting a concept and you all taking, I guess, what would be the November meeting and just providing feedback. And I think that's what we're talking about here. I mean, if you all were willing to, we're happy to do that. So, I don't mind making Mark.
Well, we don't require a concept plan with this, but I think in what everybody's talking about and going into the winter months and having to deal with delays with rain, just like we've had the last week or two, I think it'd make a ton of sense for you guys, and I think it would help introduce us to your project.
Yeah, it makes a good template. Yeah, we'll do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's not a problem. That's assuming you all passed the first phase of the rezoning tonight.
That's
We still have that issue we have to deal with, but, yeah, we will be more than willing to work with staff and keep things moving forward.
We already did that.
Any more questions or comments?
Yeah, we're still on 5, aren't we?
We're on,
I'd like to offer a motion for approval of the discussion public hearing on the rezoning from A and R2 to R6/OSMFR.
have a second?
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So you better get home and get started.
You got your work cut out for you.
Thank you.
Technological CAD systems.
Yeah. Item number 6, discussion and public hearing on a request to rezone parcel 104, tax map 141, 421 Everett Road, 20.37 acres from R1 to R1-OSR Saddlebrook Properties. The applicant has requested that this be pulled from the agenda tonight, so we will move on to item number 7. Discussion and public hearing on a final plat for Phase 2 of Bridgemore subdivision, parcel 25.04, tax map 152, 40 lots, 28.51 acres, Placemakers Development Partnership applicant. Also, we are going to postpone this.
Yes, ma'am. The field items aren't quite ready yet for final plat review.
Okay, do we need to vote on that or just move on?
We'll just move on.
Okay. Item number 8, discussion and public hearing on an amendment to the Farragut Municipal Code, Title 16, Chapter 4, driveway and other access ways to clarify the requirement for a traffic impact study in relation to rezoning request.
We kind of talked about this a little bit at last month's meeting, but to kind of further continue discussion, this is a resolution and ordinance that is before you to amend the driveways and other access ways ordinance within the municipal code, really trying to clarify some language as it relates to requiring traffic impact studies at the time of rezoning. This would provide the logic is tying the traffic impact study requirements to a requested rezoning that could substantially increase density requirements. The density certainly can impact affected roadways and other public safety issues. And density is something that, as staff, we feel like certainly needs to be assessed when density is being proposed to be increased on a property. Within your packet, it does show the amendments that we are proposing to that ordinance in red. If you have any questions, certainly about it. But the hope is this amendment will give us, you, the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, quantifiable data when making these types of density changing decisions at the time that density is occurring. Again, this is consistent with the comprehensive land use plan, strategic plan, in that it provides for appropriate land uses for future development, and staff would recommend for approval of Resolution PC 1412, which recommends approval of Ordinance 1418.
So basically, we're just moving this up.
We are currently, it's only required for, I think, preliminary plats and site plan approvals. And so this is defining when we're having a rezoning request that's changing density, that the Planning Commission may require a traffic impact study at that time as one of their tools that you all are using, certainly, when assessing a change in zoning.
Does anyone have any questions or comments? Anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item number 9, discussion and public hearing on Everett Road Corridor Impact Fee Improvement Fee Ordinance.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Gary Palmer, your Assistant Town Administrator. And I want to kind of highlight three things about this ordinance without reading direct from the slides, because I know that can be boring. I thought I'd bring you guys a nice, vexing, polarizing issue since you haven't had any in a while. Or stop me if you have any questions. So the first slide, I wanted to kind of hit the catalyst for this. Then I want to hit the history of our funding and how we've gone about improving roads in the town. And I want to hit the highlights of this ordinance. So obviously, as an incorporated town, we have a duty and responsibility to maintain our infrastructure, which includes our road system. So over the course of the town's history, we've been pretty aggressive about going after funding, federal funding, any kind of grants. The engineering department's done a great job. Daryl's done a great job about getting these grants, Sue, with the park stuff. But of course, as everybody knows, the money pot is kind of dwindling and our demand is increasing. And as we grow, of course, that demand is going to keep getting stronger. So we've got the funding and the burden increasing and the funds are decreasing. And of course, we're at that critical point where we're looking at our infrastructure, not just the roads, but also the storm sewers and so forth. We're at that critical point where we're really starting to need to throw some money into different projects, not just roads, that have to do with the public infrastructure. Hit the next one, Mark. So pre-2006, the town has always either funded the projects or done a cost share agreement with the developers as the development and the growth occurred. And that's worked fairly well. In '06, you may remember, we decided to pursue the possibility of doing an impact fee for the town, town-wide impact fee for parks, for any kind of public improvements, and it would all be related back to development. So we had Duncan Associates come and do a study, and the intent was to come up with an ordinance and a framework, a formula framework for the private developers to pay into a pot that would be used for improvements related to that development. We never did get to an ordinance portion of that, so that kind of died. And then we went back to the pre-2006 cost sharing agreements, which again has worked well up to this point. Next one, Mark. So the cost share agreements again been working well. We recently did our last cost share agreement with Split Rail Farm, where we went back and forth on negotiation. Some case law and some things that occurred with that negotiation kind of reveal the need for us to really codify this process and get something in the ordinance that we're going to promulgate and push out to people saying this is what we expect and this is what we're going to require you to do, instead of going through the negotiating process and hoping that they agree with us and do what we need them to do. So again, Split Rail Farm was kind of the catalyst to this process, this ordinance coming about. That agreement's in place, so they're going to be contributing to the Everett Road corridor in that area. So we're going to be accruing as they pull permits. And we're going to be doing a townwide ordinance. I'm actually working on an RFQ right now for consulting services for this townwide ordinance, where we're going to bring a consultant in to kind of look at our road system and look at where we're going to need to develop and improve. We kind of know those areas offhand already. I think everybody knows here where the development's going to occur. So we're going to look at those corridors and try to come up with a framework for that as well. But with this ordinance, we're doing things a little different. Next one, Mark. So the highlights of this ordinance, and I hope you had a chance to read through the very confusing cover letter and the formula that was attached, but I had to read it a couple times to really get the gist of it, and I was part of that process, and I tried to write a simple ordinance that was easy to understand. But of course, I'm looking for feedback from you all as well on that. So the framework for this ordinance for the Everett Road corridor, we're taking the fee that we calculated and used for the cost share agreement with Split Rail Farm. And that we're looking to apply that throughout the Everett Road corridor because we want to be fair to the rest of the developers along that corridor. It's simpler, it's a flat fee, it's per dwelling unit, so it's crystal clear what they're going to have to pay if they want to build along Everett Road. So the flat fee per dwelling unit, uniform amount calculated based on the Split Rail Farm negotiated agreement. And that agreement was actually negotiated down from what we originally calculated. Through the back and forth with them, we allowed them just to calculate the southbound traffic only, which that came back at a lower number and a lower fee per dwelling unit, which we're looking to apply in the interest of fairness for the rest of the Everett Road corridor. So this shall, the ordinance will apply to new development and dwelling units on land areas having direct road access to Everett Road. The fees will be collected to improve Everett Road only. And we've got a provision in there that if we don't expend those funds within 8 years of remittance, then it's refunded. So that there's a map on the last, if you want to skip ahead, Mark. Hold on a second. If you go back one, I'll just talk about that a little bit. So this is the actual formula that was used and is a part of the agreement for the Everett Road, the Split Rail Farm cost share agreement. So you can see how it was calculated, and I try to put some notes off to the side to kind of give an overview. So those are the elements up at the top and some assumptions based on the recently adopted land use plan. So we looked at the total acreage, we looked at the land use and the probable development of that property, and then we looked at the portion that Split Rail Farm would contribute using their abbreviated number, and we came up with the total trips per day, their percentage of that contribution in total on Everett Road for that portion, and it came out to the $3,276 per dwelling unit. Again, it's, I might have to read it a couple times. I did, but I wanted to put that in there to kind of show you where we came up with those numbers. And we can come back to that, but I just want to show you, Mark, if you go to the next one. This is the improvement area. So by ordinance, this is Exhibit A to that ordinance. It's going to be attached to the ordinance. That entire corridor is the road improvement area. So any development along that corridor will be affected by this ordinance. So it extends, obviously, from Everett Road all the way to the town boundary. And if you can go back to the last one, Mark. No, the Ford one.
The one before that.
Yeah, I think that's probably going to take a little time to digest, but
This one?
yeah.
Okay.
So really, basically, that's it. We're not looking for a resolution from the planning commission, although, and we're putting it in a different section. It's not going to be in the zoning ordinance. It's going to be under a traffic section. But we're looking for a recommendation by vote to take it to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen.
A recommendation of the contract.
The ordinance, yeah. I mean, normally we would ask for a resolution if it's in the zoning ordinance.
Okay.
But I'm just looking for a recommendation from this body to go to the board.
Okay.
And I'll answer any questions you have.
I guess one question I have is the applicability. If it applies to all the entire corridor. My concern is that if there's a single family residential development there, that one person's picking up a burden that we haven't applied to anybody else.
Right.
We haven't even negotiated like we have with developers.
Right.
Did you all, consider that facet, or is this one of the things relative to the case law that's kind of an all or nothing applicability?
Well, we looked at that. We looked back at the Duncan, some of the stuff they cited in there, and the applicability for whether it's a large development or a single family house. As it's written now, it would be any dwelling unit that directly goes onto Everett Road.
Would there be anything that prohibit us from exempting a single family?
We could look at writing that provision in.
Wouldn't it make sense that if you had a lot of record today, that if that lot was not further subdivided, then they wouldn't be subject to this? I think the subdivision process, to me, the plat, that changes everything.
Yep.
So all of a sudden, they're taking one acre parcel and putting 2 half-acre parcels on it. I think, to be fair, you would basically apply the fee to all those units. But if you have one empty 1 acre parcel, it seems like they would be eligible to be able to build a house without having to pay this fee, assuming, I think the key word is assuming there was no subdivision of the property. Is anybody else following me on this?
Let me take a look at the language I've got here.
Same way.
It seems like that should be exempted, but as soon as they trigger a plat or a survey or a true subdivision of the property from one lot into how many X number of lots, but anything more than that one lot, and that's what would trigger this.
So under the applicability section 16-603, This ordinance shall apply to all new development and dwelling units on land areas having direct road access to Everett Road.
What paragraph are you on?
I'm looking at the, under the first section
Okay.
of the draft ordinance. If you look at, section
Section one.
16
Before your map.
dash 602.
Third
Okay, I was
paragraph
looking-
on the top of the page,
This ordinance shall apply to all new development and dwelling units on land areas having direct road access to Everett Road. And then you go down 2 from there under definitions, development. Any change in land use, any construction of structures, or any change in the use of an existing structure, which when completed with dwelling units or contemplated construction will generate or attract traffic to improved Everett Road, and which requires subdivision or site plan approval,
Okay.
or a building permit from the town of Farragut.
Well, Bill, I mean,
Just
Yeah,
build
you're
it.
gonna, so if you have a parcel out there and you wanna build a single-family house right now,
I just think if it's a lot of record today, they should be grandfathered in.
How many lots? is
unless subdivided.
Unless subdivided, absolutely. That would no longer be a lot of
So
record.
if you're looking at
You'd
the
have
large
multiple
tract
lots.
properties out there,
Right, if somebody wants to go buy one of those farms out there and build one house, or tear down a house and build a new house, I can't see,
Yeah, I just think, see the individual applicability to an individual residence, that's,
but I think the litmus test should be the subdivision of property.
yeah.
upon subdividing a property.
Exactly. And that's how I feel. It
Yeah.
sounds like that's how Ed feels. I'm not sure everybody else feels, but.
Are we looking at a number on subdivision, or if they're doing?
Any subdivision.
Any subdivision.
Mhm.
Not 1 acre.
No, I think 1 acre into 2 is a subdivision. The staff may call that a simple subdivision, which may or may not even warrant planning commission approval, but nevertheless, I think that's still a subdivision nonetheless. So my thought is existing parcels that are of record
Yes,
today,
that aren't changed. The
that are
boundaries
not changed in the
changed.
future, they are not subject to this, I hate to use the word impact fee, it's not impact fee, this corridor development fee.
I-
What if they sell the property to a developer?
Well, then that developer's gonna subdivide, and then they're gonna hit,
All bets are off.
So really the impetus is gonna be the subdivision of the property.
yes.
Right,
Okay.
that's the trigger.
I mean, to me, that's black and white. There's no ambiguity. It's not subjective. It's very objective. It was either subdivided or it's not. And it's at record today, and anything that comes through the town with a subdivision.
Can you put that map back up there, Mark?
I was gonna ask, in the existing corridor, how many lots does that apply to?
How many?
Not many.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I can think of maybe a couple of homes that are in there
That
where
would
somebody
be-
might want to tear down and maybe one of the older
You
homes
also need to
and
be
build a new home.
clear that you're just talking about a dwelling unit, because if somebody put a church, I mean,
Or a barn.
theoretically, on a lot of record,
Right.
wasn't subdivided, that's gonna have a huge traffic impact.
that's why I said single-family residential.
Yes.
And then dwelling.
You have to
ties
be
back
real
to a
clear
residence.
about if
Well,
you-
I mean, churches do create a lot of traffic, but we've never held, I can't think in the history of this town, we've ever held a church's feet to the fire as far as municipal created road improvements. I'm putting First Baptist Concord aside because there were some things that they were doing to reassemble property where they did some road improvements and they burdened the cost of it. But
I think what you're talking about, though, is the building of a single house on an existing lot of record. I mean,
Exactly.
that's what it, if.
well,
that
right
is
now,
something-
the way it's written, if they're going to build a
Yes, they would
a
have-
detached garage,
Hey.
we're going to pick up this fee with it.
What's a dwelling unit?
Well, to me, it says a building permit.
I mean, you say building permit, that's,
This ordinance shall apply to all new development and
Pulls in
dwelling units
everything,
on
right?
land areas having direct road access to Everett Road.
Okay.
the other concern I would have is, it's not necessarily the number of parcels on this specific road, but this is kind of a concept that we're going down a road that could be a set of precedents.
You're right.
And
That's
you say,
my
well, you
concern.
did it
Yeah.
over there, you didn't do it there. So we need to be consistent too as we look
Yeah.
ahead.
definitely.
The problem there is then, if somebody wants to develop, say, on Virtue Road now, and we don't even have that in our CIP as far as when we're going to improve that road, and we're putting in 8 years, if we don't spend that money, you get it back. That's the kind of stuff that I'm kind of concerned about.
That brings up one of my concerns. It appears that when I read through this, is that $3,200 will trickle in with building permits.
Correct.
Well, so when does that 8 years start? Does it start from the last building permit?
It starts upon remittance of that individual fee.
Well, okay, well, let's look at it. Let's look at Split Rail Farm. It's pretty common for a neighborhood to take 20 years by the time the last lot is built out. I just get concerned that 8 years is too tight, even though,
Yeah.
even though it does appear that the board mayor and alderman have put Everett Road on the CIP for faster than longer, I should say. I mean, it looks like it's $3 million and they're ready to spend it in the next few years, is kind of what I'm hearing. And so maybe it's not an issue here, but it seems like 8 years is a real tight time frame to have to all of a sudden the town to, I don't know, it seems like we're kind of putting ourselves under the gun to have to refund all those in the event there was, all of a sudden there's a big public outcry for a community center and we decide, well, maybe the roads aren't that bad. I don't know. It's not our job to make those decisions, but it seems like 8 years is a tight time frame.
Yeah, and David and I talked about that, and we don't disagree with you. There were some issues with regard to takings and the constitutionality of imposing something like this. You have to have some sort of
Quid pro quo.
refunding clause in there. And I don't think the 8 years, I pulled that from
Okay.
Franklin's ordinance. But I don't think 8 years is the issue. We have to have some mechanism in there to keep us under the gun to do this improvement that we're charging these people for.
I guess what I'm thinking is it'd be a somewhat not difficult, but lengthy process to be able to keep track of all these fees that come in, trickled in over time to figure out, well, we got the project completed in 8 years with this person, but this person we didn't, and so we got to refund this person's impact fee, but yet road what are we calling it? Development district?
Corridor.
Corridor fee. And God, it just seems like it's arduous.
What happens
Is there an easier way to be able to, I think we all agree that this is a good way to address this issue and make it fair. At least as fair. It's when I think $3 million and $3,200 but I wasn't the one negotiating there, and it is what it is, and so we've already come up with that fee.
Right.
But it seems like there should be an easier way to be able to, without scrapping all this, to be able to evenly apply this and not have to worry about this clock ticking on these. I mean, it'd be easier if the development just paid the whole. I mean, normally in the past, when we've done cost share projects with other developers, all those are done up front and it's paid. In hindsight, it would have been great if this developer just would have wrote the big check in the very beginning, and that way we're not trying to keep track of all these fees coming in.
Puts the burden on us to accrue and account for.
Right. The other thought that I have is, what about indexing it for inflation? Because as we know, we've seen a lot of estimates come in and things change with the asphalt index or inflation and how hungry the road contractors are. And next thing you know, a $3 million project became a $5 million project.
I don't disagree with it. I think in Duncan's study, they talk about that. But that's a whole different ballgame than what we're doing here.
Right.
What if it changes hands? Like, what if developers, like, let's say this development back here, is it Park Place? Is that what it's called? That's changed hands a couple times, hasn't it? I mean, if that development was on Everett Road, does it matter?
It doesn't matter as far as us collecting the fee, because we're going to collect the fee upon building permit.
But then does the 8 years start over again?
It starts when they remit when that individual
Remits
lot
that, yeah.
remits that fee. That's when the clock starts ticking.
Okay.
The way it's written now.
You're saying
that's the typical language I've seen in other ordinances that are doing a similar thing.
So we got to have some mechanism in there for a refund.
Correct.
That obviously somehow the case law has stated that.
Yes.
So we just got to figure out what's the best, most fair and equitable way to do that.
Right.
Okay.
And that's what you've seen done other places.
The 8 years is I mean, I think I came across a couple that were 6 years, and I think 8 years was the one I went with, because it was an ordinance that was similar to this ordinance I wrote here. So I can do a little more research and find out what the standard is and what kind of flexibility we have with that.
Is there any particular, any deadline we're trying to meet? I mean, since the split rail farm deal's already been negotiated and it's done, so we're not under the gun to do something tonight.
We're not.
Trying to figure out how to get this thing rolling.
I think our concern is if there was anticipated development happening along Everett Road, we wanted to get something in place so we weren't trying to scramble at the last minute, which we're always doing anyway.
There is
Which
kind
there
of-
potentially is
It
something that's in the
Right.
works.
So we were looking to get something before you all and then to the board. I think we're hoping for next month. So we have one meeting, the board has one meeting in November and one meeting in December. So I wanted to we were going to have a workshop with the board at the next meeting to do this.
Carrie, I have a quick question for you. For the improved Everett Road is defined essentially as from split rail to, well, to Union, I guess. Is that what we're improving?
I think we're talking about improving all the way from basically the new signalized intersection at Everett Road and Kingston Pike all the way to the interstate.
Yeah, I need to look at that. I'm glad you caught that because I think when Tom and I were reviewing this.
We have some conflicting language in there?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's what I was wondering. Does that, because there is.
I think what I'll probably do is strike that section because all I want to really do is identify the road improvement area, which is that exhibit A.
Okay.
I don't want to confuse the process.
Well, matter of fact, I'm not sure we necessarily want to force ourselves to shoehorn us into doing all that. We may determine that the Board of Mayor and Aldermen may determine that, hey, this project that's now $5 million, well, let's just spend the $3 million and get it all the way up to a certain point. And we hate to force ourselves to have to refund all those fees based on the fact that we didn't take it all the way to the interstate.
Just a question. When was the first development approved on the split rail farm?
The very first
It's
one?
been over 8 years, hasn't it?
It's in this thing.
No,
Probably
because
07
I've
maybe?
been here 8 years, and I think it was probably 07 or 08.
It's in this agreement that you, this first split rail was
Well, that agreement-
September of 2012, but before that it was.
There's a
Everett Hills
Hills.
is,
Yeah, it was
it's
something
probably
like
been
that.
about 7 years or so. Yeah.
So
I've
how
been
would that
more
fit
than
in
that.
here? I mean, did they submit?
They haven't started paying.
Well, the good news is they've not remitted any fees yet, so the clock wouldn't have started ticking.
They're under a different agreement, so they're under that, in fact, it's in your packet.
Well, I know the current people are.
Yeah.
The original people never submitted anything, is that
No,
right?
that's correct.
And this $3,276 is specific to Everett Road.
Correct.
And anything else that comes along will have to be negotiated.
Right, and I think that's what we're gonna look at this consultant to do, to take a look at our road system and kind of, hopefully the people we hire have the knowledge and the best practices from around the nation on how this is being done and applied, and so we can do it properly here.
What time frame are we looking for that? Do we have one yet?
We're in October. If I can get that RFQ published by the end of the month, I think we could have something back January, February.
Are you thinking a blanket corridor fee or for particular, one would be for Union Road, one would be for Virtue Road, one would be for?
I am thinking, and this is just me, I'm thinking it's gonna be formula-based. Probably with a bunch of variables in there, the land use. They're gonna look at the acreage, they're gonna look at the cost, they're gonna look at the trip generation, depending on the use. I think it's gonna be formula-based.
Could you use the terminology of a minimum of $3,276 based on the economy and going up, whatever the appropriate wording would be?
You talking about putting an escalator in there for inflation?
Tied into like CPI or something.
I can talk to David about that and figure out what our options are with that. See if it's, run it by Tom and see if there's any issues with that.
Who's Dave?
David Smoke, town manager.
Oh.
The big cheese.
Okay, if you said David, I might have known.
I did, I said David. Did I say David? I said Dave.
Okay. Hey, David.
Gary, do you feel like that you have.
I made
Do you
notes
have any-
on what you have, and I agree
We
with
talked about a bunch of
your
different things
recommendations.
tonight.
I don't think there's any issue with us making those changes with the recommendation to the board. I think what I'm looking for is just, to kind of gauge your general sense of this. If you're entirely opposed to it, I just kind of want to get this out there, have it vetted a little bit by the planning body before we go because you're going to be the ones that are exacting this.
I think when we originally kind of created this a year or two ago, the original about the corridor, I think it's a great, fair way of getting a developer to be able to participate in the road improvements. Do I necessarily agree with the 3276? Maybe not, but I can go through the formula and kind of see one way or the other, and we've already got a baseline here. So I think in principle, I think what we're doing is a very fair way versus doing a town-wide impact fee and saying, all right, it doesn't matter where you're going to develop, you're going to pay this fee. And the reason being is because properties that are on substandard roads, they're priced accordingly. And so properties that are on Kingston Pike or on already improved roads, those properties are priced much higher. And so somebody's going to come in already going to spend a lot more money on one of those properties that has good infrastructure in place versus one maybe on Everett Road that didn't have the infrastructure in place. So I think that the laws of supply and demand already kind of dictate that to a certain degree. So I think the corridor concept is a great concept, and I think it's a real fair way to get developers to participate in the improvements of the roads, which ultimately they're the ones that are putting the additional burden on those roads, and their residents are going to be the ones to enjoy those roads.
And when we come back to do the town-wide study, we're going to have an engagement process attached to that as well. So we'll have the development community come in and express their concerns, and we'll work with them and the people that this is going to impact to try to get those issues worked out. So we're not going to blindside anybody with it.
Have any more questions or comments? And we're making a recommendation on this.
Yes, ma'am, I'm looking for a motion to take with me to the board.
Do I have a
A
recommendation?
Without the comments that were made tonight, which will be taken to the board?
I think we can incorporate those comments you made. I think the one was only upon subdivision of the property, so we'll work out some language to make sure that it covers that. I'm striking the improved Everett Road definition, and I'll look at the time frame to find out what our max time frame is, and I'll find out what Tom's comfort level is with that, Tom Hale, so we can get that number in there and make sure that we're in compliance.
And maybe some sort of inflation index, because I can just
look at an escalator.
To me, 3276 just seems like pennies in the future going forth, and the millions of dollars that the taxpayers are going to spend on these roads.
So you're saying take it to the Board of Mayor and Alderman and not bring it back here?
Yes, ma'am.
But then, that's just for the Everett Road. The overall
I understand
will be
that.
brought back. Okay.
Could we not set our own time frame, say 10, 12 years?
If you want, I can look at the max that Tom's comfortable with, and we'll just set it at that. And I
Okay.
think that'll be based on whatever case law or issues he can find out there.
Okay.
I for one, would like to see whatever that max number is, whether it's 8, 10, or 12, or 20, whatever the town attorney's comfortable with is what personally I'd like to see in there, just to give the town a little bit more time, just not put us under the gun, because 8 years goes by so fast.
It does.
Do you have everything you need, you think?
I've
I
got
have a
those notes, so. yes, ma'am.
Quick question, in the 16-606B, in the case of a development which contemplates more than 20 dwelling units, is there a particular reason why you picked 20?
What section
No.
are you looking at?
No, just,
No, in fact, that was, I'll give you a kind of a glimpse into the process. When we develop these ordinances, whoever's writing the ordinance, myself, Mark, collaboration, we'll go out and look at other cities, look at best practices out there, see what we can find that other cities have done, try to pull that language and Farragutize it. And then we'll send it to Tom to kind of look at it from a legal standpoint. And he bled all over this thing when I got it back. So there were some things that he put in there that, I don't question. He puts them in there because he thinks they're in there. That he made a note about the 20. He said it wasn't, he wanted to have some basis in there.
Okay.
So that's where the 20 came from, but we're not married to that number.
I guess I'm still a little uncomfortable about the process, and I wonder if there's a way we could kind of work it where we could see the revised. And if we've got any comments on that, we could send them individually to you, and then you can show that to the board mayor and alderman, because they could make changes in it for the discussion or what have you.
Would it, and I hate
I mean,
coming here and saying I need this right now. I would love to give you guys time to,
but I guess I'd like to see the wording that's going to the board of mayor and alderman.
if you like, what I can do is once I get this finalized, I'll send it out to you all, and
To confirm
you
it.
can individually give me your comments if you have comments on them,
Yeah.
before I go to the board. I'd be happy to do that.
This contract that goes along with that?
Yes, ma'am. Because I refer to it in the ordinance and the description, that contract is a split rail farm contract.
Okay, but I didn't think it was 96 units anymore.
It may be different. That's not
Should that not
that's
be
not the
corrected?
actual contract. So it may have changed. I'm gonna put the executed contract in with the board's packet.
Right.
That one I pulled off the
original,
network.
And then it was reduced.
It may be different.
Any more questions or comments, concerns? Do I have a motion for recommendation?
Make a motion for recommendation with some of the changes that we discussed. Hopefully, you won't make me elaborate.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose?
Thank you.
We have one last item here, discussion of an amendment to the text of the Farragut zoning ordinance as it relates to the mixed-use town center outlined in the comprehensive land use plan. This is a continuation of something we've been working on for a while.
Yes, this has been discussed at the previous two planning commission meetings, and we also had a workshop meeting back in August, I believe it was, to talk about this topic. Basically, what I was wanting to review tonight are the changes, the comments that we tried to incorporate into the draft amendment per the discussion we had in September, and maybe just some things that I thought of or had, questions about that I wanted to maybe get some further discussion on tonight. So if that's an acceptable way to proceed tonight, I will do that, and we'll just kind of go through. As you know, the things that are different from what was in the September packet are in green, in your packets there. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about, just to step back a little bit here, is what we're really trying to do, I think, with this draft wording to the C1 zoning district and potentially the PCD and O1. There's clearly differences, in my view at least, and y'all can give me your feedback, between what we're trying to do here and a full-blown town center district development. And so what I think we're trying to do is to try to have a plan of development on a parcel by parcel basis. Could involve a more traditional town center layout potentially, but this is really more targeted toward the Silver Spoon property, the Phillips 66 property, redevelopments, things that you're probably not going to get a full-blown, multi-building type presentation. You're not going to have probably new public streets, like we had with the concept plan for the property west of the town hall when the town center district was actually created. So I'm trying to differentiate that and trying to find a happy balance between providing a visual plan and a use plan of development in the areas that's identified as mixed-use town center in the comprehensive plan that would not be incompatible with a mixed-use town center. I think if someone is coming in with a true full-blown town center district project that's going to involve new public infrastructure, then they need to request a rezoning to the town center district. This language is not geared toward addressing that kind of development. It can be, I can modify it, but that's not really what we're trying to do. I think what we need do, what I would recommend at the staff level though, is to have a serious discussion on the current wording in the town center district that limits a rezoning to that district to a minimum of 15 acres. I think we need to really look at that because there could be properties that are much smaller than 15 acres that would be good candidates for rezoning to town center district. And I don't want to pigeonhole our, the development of a downtown because we have that language in there. And I'm not saying it's bad language. It was just a product of the time and place. It made perfect sense at the time it was built in there. But I do think that needs to be revisited. And frankly, I wouldn't have a lot size limitation on the town center district. I think it needs to meet the design requirements and all the design criteria of the town center district and the design requirements in the municipal code. And if it can be demonstrated to satisfy those requirements, I don't think it should be limited based on the size of the tract. That's just my opinion. I don't know, how do you all feel about that?
That's a good thought.
Good point.
So what we probably will do is look at that town center district and we'll probably make some requested amendments to that, certainly dealing with that 15 acres, and maybe look at some other things in that district to give it more flexibility so that if someone is coming in, with a larger downtown style development with new public infrastructure, that they're going to have the flexibility to rezone the property and to go ahead and proceed with following the town center district language, because we spent a lot of time on the development of the town center district and those design requirements. We looked at, and Ed, and you all know that we're on the planning commission, we looked at several different communities from all over the country, and I think we built in the ordinance and the requirements some of the best language that we thought we could find but it was really geared toward a new development on a relatively large piece of property that has new public streets. So I just wanted to differentiate that from what we're really trying to do right now with the C1. So if you all understand that and are in agreement with what those differences, then I'll proceed with going through the C1 itself and talk about the things that we changed since the last discussion in September. Does that sound reasonable? Well, we talked about big boxes, last month, and of course, in a mixed-use town center, a large big box is out of character. So we talked about what should be the square footage limitation. Originally, we had 50,000 in the draft ordinance, and the suggestions were made to lower that down to 25,000 square feet. So we incorporated that change into the draft. Does anybody have any comments or concerns about that? Another topic that we talked quite a bit about last month were drive-throughs, and I've got a couple of pictures. And we had a little subcommittee meeting with the press and talked about some of these things, and the more we thought about it, the more we felt like maybe drive-throughs should just not be allowed in the mixed-use town center area. So I did take it out of this draft, or I left that prohibition in the draft, actually. But I did put some language in there for discussion that if you do feel that drive-throughs should be a component in the mixed-use town center, that we may consider some of those parameters that were provided in the packet. We actually have a couple of drive-throughs, which I have one on the screen here. This is over at Brooklawn Street in the Kroger development. Firehouse Subs has a drive-through, but it's really very indiscreet. There's no menu board. They just have a pickup window. Obviously, people call in, and it's just go through the drive-through for the convenience of not having to go inside. So it is a very indiscreet. This is the back of the building. You wouldn't necessarily know that they have a drive-through just in looking at it. So some of the language that I put in there deals with that, you know, that if you're going to have a drive-through, it has to be located to the rear of the building. But, you know, as we talked with our subcommittee about, that could be a potential problem on a corner lot. You know, it's going to be hard to orient a drive-through so that it would not be visible from a public street. And that's some of the language that we have in there. That if you have, you know, signage that it's limited to 1 square foot, that you don't have, you know, lanes that directly connect to a public street, drive-through lanes, that you minimize pedestrian and vehicular conflicts. We talked a little bit about that in September. So I don't know, how do y'all feel about drive-throughs? Both this first section is dealing with restaurants, and then there's the second section dealing with financial and real estate services. Do you think they need to be allowed with certain restrictions, or do you think they should just not be allowed?
I've driven through looking at lots of drive-ins, drive-throughs. The ones I don't like are the ones where the pickup window is very close to a door into the restaurant, and that's usually the fast foods. I did look at some that, you know, LCUB, and
yeah, that's LCUB on the screen there. That's their drive-through in the back of their building.
That's a different type of. How do you put that in the middle of a town center and keep the concept?
Well, that's a good question. I don't think they're, personally at the staff, my staff opinion is I don't think they're compatible with the mixed-use town center, and I wouldn't recommend they be a part of a mixed-use town center.
I agree with that. I think it doesn't really encourage pedestrian.
Yeah. It's kind of contrary
activity
to the intent of what we're trying to do in a mixed-use town center.
Kind of encourages running down pedestrians.
Exactly. Exactly.
Now, I suppose if someone was adamant about wanting to do something and they felt like they could present something that, you know, they could always request to have the text amended later or revisited. But I just, at this stage, I don't think it would be cleaner and more simple just to
I don't mind
to not have them
at all, even for financial services. I mean, in New York City, they have the if you need to go to your ATM, it's right there on the street.
Yes.
Connected to the building or inserted into the building. I don't really need it for, if we're not going to do it for food services, financial services doesn't bother me either if we don't have it for them either.
It was a pretty big topic of discussion when we developed the town center district, and it ended up we actually do have provisions for a drive-through for pharmacies and financial services in the town center district zoning district, but it does have a lot of this language that I have in the draft or for consideration in the draft C1, but you know.
The only thing that I can think about with differentiating between the financial and the fast food is maybe it's a safety issue with the financial, where you let's face it, we're not all walking around on the, there's not that, there would be times when there would not be
That
that
much
many
population.
pedestrian. Right,
Yeah.
that big of pedestrian, that you're standing there at an ATM, you
Yeah.
know, by yourself.
Yeah.
And so I can see a safety factor with that, to have a drive-through where you don't have to get out of your car.
Yeah.
Now, I'm paranoid and I think about things like that, but,
Well.
But if there wasn't opportunities to do that in other parts of the town, I would maybe reconsider. But I think there's, very close by, there are other banks and pharmacies and things that you can do a drive-through. I think if we're gonna if we're gonna have a small little downtown area, I think it needs to be like a downtown. If you think about downtown Knoxville, there's no drive-throughs on Gay Street. I mean, all the bank teller, not tellers, but the ATMs are on the street, just like you were saying. I'm
Yeah.
against it, so I'm with you, Mark.
Yeah. I was in Woodstock, Georgia. I don't know if you all been there now, but it's got a very active little town center. And they have 4-story buildings. 3 of the stories are residence. Bottom story is commercial. And there was no place to have drive-through or in that town center. It was very attractively done. The parking lots were too small.
You say Woodstock, Georgia?
Mhm.
I need to check that out.
You had to get out of your car before you pulled into the parking space. They did make provisions for the people who lived there to park. I mean, they had special parking. But there were lots of people walking around, and it just wasn't suited to a lot of
Yeah.
vehicular traffic.
Yeah. So is that majority of how y'all feel about drive-throughs? Just keep it
My
out?
preference would be not to have it, but,
Okay.
and deal with it with, somebody could make a case and come back for an exception, rather than have it in to start with and then deal with
Yeah.
it the other direction.
Yes.
And that was kind of like the discussion back when
Yeah.
we debated quite a bit, and that
Yeah.
they got it at least narrowed down to a
Yeah.
few uses,
Narrowed it down
not
to
a
3.
blanket.
Yeah. Okay.
I also think it encourages commerce. If you're walking around and picking things up in stores, you might walk by another store and
Yeah.
go in and,
Yeah.
you know,
Sure.
just
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Yep.
That's why grocery stores keep ringing.
Okay, that's good. Added a provision for bed and breakfast in the inns. I don't know if that's, just something that's in the town center district language, but it at least gives them the opportunity to have that. Ed made a comment last month about how to deal with the situation where you may have a series of buildings that are joined together, and I think, really they need to rezone it to town center district. But if they didn't, then we build in some language in there that where a building is planned to be joined with another building to form a series of buildings, the design requirements provided for in Title 14, Chapter 3 of the Farragut Municipal Code shall apply. And that talks about building facades and, the appearance and the compatibility of buildings and their relationship to the street. So I think that would cover us in the event that someone were, wanting to have a series of buildings on an improved on an improved street, and they weren't putting any new public improvements. It would just give us a visual consistency with, a full town center district type layout. So we also added some, we made some modifications to the building height. We talked about that last month. And one of the things that we put in there was, per the discussion in September, was a minimum of 2 stories in height. The question I have, and we have it in the draft, is can we include language where the building just at a minimum looks like it's 2 stories, because you start getting into a requirement for elevators and things, which is a large expense. You know, if we're going to require a minimum of 2 stories as a compromise, you know, is it something that you all would be comfortable with? Just the, you know, the appearance of the building. I know, you know, for me, I'm thinking about the functionality and the use and the intent of the district, and I have a little bit of a concern about that because you're addressing the aesthetic component perhaps, but you're not addressing how that district is really supposed to function. You know, you're really wanting to build residential into the area so that you have those people walking by the front or going to the shops, going up to the ATMs, you know, or whatever. But you know, I know some of those buildings on at North Shore Town Center look like they're 2-3 story, but they're you know, faux 2 stories. They really aren't functional 2-story spaces, and I don't know how you all feel about that. We also did include language that the 2-story minimum would only apply to a new building, so that, you know, somebody that's maybe even doing a substantial remodel is not going to have to, you know, add another layer of another story onto their building.
That had bothered me because there's a shopping center down near the mall, which I won't name some of the things in it because I can't remember right now anyway, but they did a update of it where they put on pieces on the front of it that made it look like it was more stories than what it is, but it looked really bad. It was, and I wouldn't want to see us just to require something and then it end up not looking.
Yeah,
I think
what caught my eye was the fact that I didn't want it to turn into a Hollywood set.
Yeah, exactly. That's what this shopping center
Blazing
does.
Saddles.
That was the first thing that came to my mind when I read.
Well, that's exactly what this shopping
Wasn't
center
Blazing
looks
Saddles,
like.
but it was that kind of a.
I know that the shopping center that Rita's talking about, and I won't mention it, but their big thing is they just have this just stucco everywhere, and I'm not sure they had good intentions, but maybe some architect had good intentions in the back room. I'm not sure. They're trying to give it a little downtown flavor, and they did fail miserably at it. This has actually been done in the town, and if you think of where the Little Turkey Creek, what do we call it? No,
it's
not
been done at the Farragut Village where
Farragut Village.
where Mellow Mushroom is.
Right.
They have a faux second story, but the dormers makes it look like it's more than 1 story.
So the cost of doing that is not something that a developer would or builder would be. Is it
balk at?
right?
Well, no, it's more expensive, especially what we're going to require it in brick, which is I think how it should be, not in stucco.
Yes.
But the reality is this is, I think, an important criteria of this whole flavor that we've been talking about for years that we're trying to create, without putting just an undue burden on somebody, forcing them specifically on some of these redevelopment parcels where they would tear the whole building down and build a new building on some of the corners that we've talked about tonight, without just forcing them to automatically go 2 stories. I think it can, number one, this body will look at it, we'll get renderings with the site plan, and if we see some things that look like a Hollywood set or look like Disney World, and it's just that's not what we're looking for, I think that would be the complete appropriate time to say, okay, now wait a second. You've taken our intent here and you've just thrown something up there. My thought is, instead of just having the facade look like a 2-story on one side, it still needs to look from any business, especially from adjacent properties as well as public right-of-ways. I think it needs to look like a 2-story on all 4 sides.
Yes, it does.
True.
Buildings all the time put up parapets. And a lot of times they do it just to make their building look bigger. I'll pick on it's not a good example, but this is an extreme example of a gigantic parapet. The fireworks store down at Watt Road. That building itself is probably only has 12, 14-foot ceilings, but yet the parapet makes the building look 60 feet tall. Obviously, that's a big attention-getting thing with all the streamers and stuff on it. So parapets are not a big deal. It can be done. Is it a little more expensive to do it in brick? Absolutely. But it's a lot less expensive than doing a full second story and trying to comply with ADA.
You know, I read this totally different than a false. Right. I read it that the building would, on the main street, could be 2 stories, but actually it was 3 stories because of the terrain. See what you said?
No.
I read it was on the. Well,
You could
look
do
at-
that.
look
You
at-
could do that, yeah, you could. I don't think that's specifically addressed in the draft wording. But yeah,
Well-
you could do that.
It can, not to exceed 4
Four,
stories.
4 stories, yes,
There's buildings in downtown Lenore City that are 3 stories on the front and only
Yes.
2 stories on the back.
sure,
And when you actually pull in, there's buildings where you actually pull into the second
yes.
floor.
Well,
on the
Renaissance
backside.
is like that.
Yeah, Renaissance the same way. You're 2 stories on the
Some of
front
your-
and 1
yeah.
story on the back.
Sure.
This general area that we're talking about, where this MUTCD, am I getting all that acronym
The
right?
topography is not really.
Topography really doesn't
Mm.
warrant a lot of that we're
No.
talking about, as far as having 1 story daylighted, 1 story non-daylighted. But I think we can get this 2-story element in there without looking like a Western movie set.
And we have asked our architectural design consultants to help us with that. So, and I think,
And it's in the draft document that's posted on the website too. Within the mixed-use town center area, it's talking exactly what you're talking about, Noah, the wrapping of all the architectural elements
Right.
around the building. So it's not just one facade that you're basically dressing
yeah,
up.
you don't have a blank wall either
So
on.
it's in that
No.
initial draft.
This is, my concern with that is, how do we avoid ending up with a town center district that is all 1-story buildings with a faux second story? How do
Well,
we
I mean-
promote having buildings come in that are going to have
And that
the,
gets back to my very first point when I started this discussion, is that this is a middle ground, it's a hybrid.
okay,
It's a hybrid between a true town center district and a higher level of architectural expectation that would be consistent with the mixed-use town center
Okay.
general appearance.
What's great about this is that if we get, and that's why that 15 acres is so important. Somebody comes to us and they're doing a big downtown district, they're not going to be eligible for this. They're going to have to go through the TCD district.
Yeah.
okay.
And that's why that 15 acres is so
I
important.
forgot
So-
about that.
So we couldn't end up with exactly like what you said, where we just
Yeah.
have street after street of all these fake second stories.
And the TCD has very clear language that would prohibit that.
Okay.
Exactly what
But
you're.
I think you have to be careful I mean, take the Silver Spoon topography, for example.
Yes,
You're elevated on it Kingston Pike,
true.
and
Yeah,
so
that would be one.
you think in terms of I'll say an enlarged parapet height.
Yeah.
But simulate a second story there,
Mhm.
I guess I'm trying to visualize it, but I think you will have a problem because it'll be kind of distinguishable that it's,
Because you're looking down into
because
it.
you're looking down at.
I had,
And that, the applicability of this kind of universally bothers me, so I'd rather,
Mhm.
I guess, err on the other side myself.
couldn't we catch that with renderings and line of sight views when somebody comes through the site plan process? Because I agree with that. I wouldn't want to be up there where Domino's is and then look down into that hole and then see these just big tall 4 walls. It just looks like a little cavern on top of the building.
Yeah.
I think it would look funny. I mean, if it was me and I was building, I would just go ahead and raise my ceiling height up because it's cheap to do that, and just have real tall ceilings on the inside. If I
Yeah.
just have 20-foot ceilings
Sure.
for my tenants or users on the inside, and not have this big area up there, because I mean, you can get snow trapped in there in the event and things like that, and water and so forth. So personally, that's how I would build it, and just not actually do the second floor. But I agree with Ed. It would look kind of funny if you're up there on that hill and you're looking down and you see this just funny hole on top of the building with these, big 10 or 12 or 15-foot walls, parapet walls all the way around it.
Yeah, that's true. I mean,
That's probably the most.
But you don't have that problem like it's not like a metal mushroom because of the way it backs up.
Right.
against the
yes,
wood
it's
line.
kind of
Yeah.
all it surrounded by creek. Yeah, I mean, it's the cleanest way, obviously, is just to do the full 2 stories or up to 4
Leave out
stories.
the appearance of.
We were just trying to provide a more cost-effective option, that.
I think that having a two-story mandate on some of the redevelopment parcels that we've spent a lot of time discussing is going to be a real hardship on those parcels. I mean, I think it's somebody's going to look at that and go, well, you know, I can comply with all the architecture, I can do this, I can do that, but I just can't, due to the fact of what that two-story triggers and the desirability of two-story with some tenants, or lack of desirability to the second floor, even with an elevator. I understand what we're all trying to go after. We're just trying to find some middle ground on some of these transitional parcels until we get to a TCD someday, which we hope to have somewhere.
That's exactly what
and that's what we were trying to get after. And I think the language could be included in there, specifically with upon site plan submittal, you got to submit the line of sight drawings and the elevations, and that way on a couple of these that we're concerned about, that's probably the worst one, is the old Silver Spoon, because you're going to look down on it. I can't really think of anywhere else in the area that you would look down on, at least from a car, unless you're in a helicopter. But the
Well, like the Phillips 66 plot, if we're going to do something with the house.
I can't see that much grade change
Then-
there between
then you're
one
up-
and the other. I mean, there's
but
definitely
you're
some grade
up
change.
above there where the house is.
But if you say that it must look like a two-story building from all elevations, then you can't do the parapet you're talking about. It'd have to be,
Yeah.
if you had language in there like that, then I could easily add that in there.
I think it's pretty black or white, that if you can stand on adjacent
Must look
property,
like a
stand-
two-story building from all elevations.
and adjacent right-of-ways. And
That gives them
adjacent property.
flexibility to do whatever they want interior.
Right.
You know, it might be a lesser cost, but
Finished attic or something. I mean,
visually, it would,
we have no flexibility. It's rather inexpensive storage if
yeah.
done correctly, whatever their use is.
So, okay, buildings should be a minimum. Alright, as viewed from all elevations. So what I would say then is buildings shall be a minimum of 2 stories in height or have the appearance of a building that is at least 2 stories in height as viewed from all elevations. And we can tweak that a little bit. That's kind of what I'm thinking there, so that you kind of address that
Okay.
25-foot parapet hypothetical.
I'm gonna
It would look kind of strange.
I'm going to pass around something that kind of has this. That this is a store. This is actually a grocery store out of Edmond, Oklahoma. That, and I don't. Let me see if it. Can you turn? Do you have the overhead up there?
Yeah.
We're not really set up for the
Sure.
overhead. Let me just.
Yeah,
pass-
no, I could put it
Let me
up.
pass around and see if anybody. But what this is it's a grocery store, and you can kind of look at it like that. And so what they've done is it has very tall ceilings, but it actually looks like a 3-story brick, old kind of downtown building, and just kind of pass it down.
You want me to
So
put
it
it
can,
up
like I
here?
said, this can be done to have the look that we're kind of looking for, where you have.
Well, Ingalls somewhat has that.
Yes.
That's true.
They do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
Got the screen on, do you want to try and put it on
Yeah.
that?
If it'll come up there, I can
Yes.
stick it on.
What does it look like from the back? I've never been.
It's like this one. Ingalls. I think theirs is just a big parapet. So I think
Yeah, I
you
think
So
In the back.
Here's a-
flat.
it doesn't look appropriate.
whatever that land
here's
behind
an
it.
angle of it right here. It's called Uptown Grocery,
There you go.
and it's just a 1-story building. Here's another angle of it. Is that helping right there?
There you go. That's good.
And then here, this one I stepped back
Like
a little
that.
bit and got a little bit further away from it.
Oh, that's
Let's
neat.
see if I can get the light a little bit here. Yeah, if that helps.
I don't know if that you can kind of see that is a 1-story building, but it kind of has those multi-story elements to it. The lighting's not good. That one's a little bit better.
So that's just single story.
Yeah, that's with 20 some odd foot ceilings.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that. Looks like a warehouse type,
Yeah,
downtown
it-
district type
yeah.
building, for sure.
It's a 2-story height, but it's 1 story, I mean, 1 level.
Right. It
building.
is a single level building.
So it's, because, I mean, you still have the interior lights that are hung high. I mean, it's still a functioning 2-story building. You know, with one will occupy the levels of it.
Right. But their intent, it wasn't a restriction for them, but their intent was they wanted a brick, more of a downtown kind of warehouse-looking building that had looked like it had been converted to a grocery store, but it's actually a brand-new building. Well, it was brand new when I took the picture in 2012, so.
Yeah, that's good, yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay.
So it can be done.
Yes.
There are some correct ways of doing it, and then there's, like the one that we were talking about down near the mall, there are some really poor ways of doing it.
Yeah. Okay, and we changed the maximum to 4 stories. That's to be consistent with the TCD and BD4. One thing that I added in the draft was some specific language dealing with streetscape and outdoor open spaces, which to me are really key to a mixed-use town center, to have those functional gathering spaces. You know, plazas, outdoor seating, you know, things that invite pedestrians to that space. You know, it could involve, you know, landscaping. It could involve, you know, a mini park or some kind of, you know, I've got some pictures I could show you in a minute. Some things that I saw on a recent trip that I took. And then some other things just to think about is how to deal with site lighting, signage, and landscaping in this mixed-use town center. You know, in the town center district, there's some language that talks about street lights. You know, again, that's for the intent, I think, was for where somebody's putting in a new public street, that, you know, you have some requirements for street lights. You know, 16 feet in height. They have to have a frosted or a white globe. You know, those kinds of things. I don't know in this hybrid area how y'all feel about site lighting. Yeah, I don't know. It's
Well, it would seem like if you're trying to encourage pedestrian and people, you need to, again, provide a safe environment for them, which the lighting does contribute to.
yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, a lot of the, and I'd just go ahead and go to some of these slides. This was in Williamsburg, Virginia. And this is, again, is a very narrow pedestrian path, but it does show, you know, a little bit of all the components of, you know, some of these things that are the finer touches that we need to think about, because they really can make a big difference. It's the little things that you do in a development that really make it, separate it, and make it something special and unique. You know, this development has the lights. You know, it's got the little street light there. It's got the you know, the perpendicular type of sign. It's more pedestrian oriented, so you can see it as you're walking along the sidewalk. It's got some, you know, street trees here. It's got some planters and, you know, some visual landscaping enhancements along that frontage. Again, it's an inviting atmosphere. It encourages, you know, a pedestrian to want to be there. So it's those kinds of things that I'm trying to flush out in this kind of hybrid area, where you are talking more about, you know, you're going from like a commercial site, the lighting and signage and things like that there, versus more of a transitional mixed-use town center application. I don't have the answers on that, but
Are those lights very good?
yeah, those are good because they're very glaring. I mean, they're good as far as they do show a lot of light, but they're not particularly effective. They're very bright at night. They don't have the anti-glare requirements that we have in town.
If you wanted to, you could
that on the
put that in,
screen.
that way you could see some of those lights that kind of have that
Yeah,
historic
that's-
look, but yet they still meet our glare ordinance.
Yes.
If you wanted to.
Yeah, I can put that on there. Yep. Yeah, Noah's gonna put on, the four-story office building down there.
This might help right here.
This is one example.
Hold it up a little higher. Everybody see that right there?
Yep.
That's during the day. And then
Oh, yeah,
that was
it does
about a
look
month
nice.
ago at 10 o'clock at night. But one of the things
It looks really neat.
that we did is we wanted historical lanterns,
Mhm.
but they still meet the glare ordinance where they shine down instead of out. And they're, as you can see, it's still pretty well lit without having a lot of street lights. Now we have a lot of landscape lighting and uplighting. I'm sorry I'm moving around so much. But kind of gives you an idea of some of the lighting that you could incorporate in this.
And all that's allowed in, regular C1 right now. So
Right.
we may not need to do anything with the lighting at this point. Some of that's going to be addressed with the architectural design
Yeah,
standards.
That's kind of what I was thinking. You want
So,
it to be consistent with.
It's just something to think about because, again, it's those little things that really make a big difference in this kind of
You know what,
setting.
too much, to me, that's a lot. I mean, it almost looks like.
Haven't been by there at night.
It's
My-
too much. I mean, if you think
Oh, on
about
that
a
one?
down- Yeah, I mean, if you think about a downtown district, it's,
It's a little softer.
yes.
Yeah.
You did good.
My
But,
concern is that you want to make sure that whatever lighting you pick for these, you want that to stay consistent, so it's
Yes.
all part of
Yes.
that
I think
same
that's very
feel.
important. Well, we could put some, yeah, yeah, that's a little, again, it's a little tricky when you're not potentially developing a multi-building.
Yeah.
But at the same
Development.
time, and I'm thinking of the area there in front of the schools that they were talking about, that they're getting ready to do something. Even you want consistency within that
Mhm.
development,
Mhm.
even if it doesn't at some point in time extend out, at least that development needs to be consistent.
Yeah.
Well, will we have more control over that with our architectural designs guidelines?
Very possibly, yes. Yes. I mean, we've just got the first draft a few days ago, so, and I think you all have we emailed that out. It's on the website too, so I haven't delved into it enough to know how specifically it addresses that particular topic. I know it does talk quite a bit about signage. And I think, again, with signage, if you're doing a full-blown town center district, then there's specific requirements in the town center district requirements in the municipal code that deal with signage that are very different from a traditional C1. But the questions I have are whether the signage that would be allowed in just a regular development in C1 would be appropriate for a transitional mixed-use town center project. It's internal illumination is not allowed in the town center district, or any illumination currently. I think you can do some tasteful illumination, maybe with like gooseneck fixtures, that have kind of a classy look to them. And there's some of that I know that's in the draft architectural design standards. So maybe when we go through that process, we can flush those things out a little bit more. But I didn't know how you all felt about that. If you want to just kind of keep those things basically as allowed in C1 and not mess with those right now, or if you feel that we need to have some kind of transitional provisions for those accessory kind of site elements, street lighting, the landscaping,
The problem you run into is these will always be, these buildings like the Silver Spoon and the Phillips 66
Yeah.
will always be in a very well-traveled, busy intersection. And that's not going to change, regardless of what we
Absolutely not.
do. So it's you kind of need to be fair to the businesses
Yes.
that are there.
Yeah. That's what's tough about this, is that you're trying to, again, it's just a transitional thing.
Because you're not gonna be able to have things like this and have people see them without causing a lot of accidents on Kingston Pike when we're trying to figure out what
Yeah.
the special
This
day
is
is.
more, these pictures are more, to me, they're more designed for someone doing a full-blown town center district.
Yeah,
So it's kind of this hybrid thing that we're trying to.
Well, and again, I go back to the West End, is that what it's called, West End down here?
Yes.
You could have something like that
Mhm.
in the West End, now,
yeah.
Yeah.
Or in the Mellow Mushroom
uh-huh.
area.
I mean, I like sandwich board signs in a town center district. I
Mhm.
think, again, it's an element that it invites activity.
Yep.
It
Yep.
invites,
Yep.
you know, pedestrian traffic. You know, like the way they've dealt with landscaping here too is really nice. I mean, it's a mixture of things. It's visually appealing to me anyway. They got some outdoor seating. Again, they're constrained by a rather limited pedestrian walkway through there. I think it needs to be a little wider than that, but it's got a lot of good things going on that gives it kind of a liveliness that I think we need to try to promote even in this mixed-use town center transitional kind of area.
The thing that jumps out to me in that picture is the sidewalk, the pavers.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Are they easy to walk on?
Not for me.
They're not the most functional things in some ways, and they have a maintenance, you know, pretty significant maintenance component, but they certainly do look nice. And this is another kind of an example of, you know, working in some landscaping and interest along a street frontage. This is at University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, where they've got a substantial trellis there that it really, I couldn't do it justice, but it was really well done. The streetscape, and they've kind of built this visually appealing transition between the street and the building. This is something that we're requiring in the mixed-use town center in the draft, low-impact development techniques. This is an example of a bioswale. This is at University of North Carolina, where you've got that nice visual. There's a nice transition between the building and the street that's inviting.
And Carolina Blue Rocks.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, it's a very hilly campus. I was kind of surprised, but and they've got some street lights and things lining that. And here's a rain garden. This is on the campus, and that's another example of, you know, maybe an outdoor space, a visual amenity that we're trying to incorporate as an element in the mixed-use town center through the low-impact development. And you could certainly incorporate into that some, you know, gathering space there, picnic tables, you know, different things that you could do to make that inviting to pedestrians. So it's kind of you know, how to deal with landscaping, I think, is also an important element in how we treat this mixed-use town center, because, you know, in a traditional town center district, you're going to probably have your street trees. We have that in the town center district ordinance that have to be no further than 50 feet apart, and there's some flexibility in there in placement. You also have to have street trees that kind of buffer a parking lot from an adjacent street in the town center district. And those things are also being addressed in the architectural design standards that our consultants are working on. But that's just to give you some visual ideas of some things that just to be thinking about with these little accessory visual touches that really add to the character of a development. So do you all want, on those topics, do you want to just leave those unchanged for now and just let that be governed by C1 at this point, and then you know, depending on what comes out of the architectural design standards, maybe have some of those things revisited to be consistent with that. How do y'all feel about
We're
that?
not talking too long of a time frame of difference, are we?
Well, the standards should be finalized, at least we're anticipating in January, I think. So, you know, it might be February, March before there's any adoption of anything related to that potentially.
I just don't want us to miss, I don't think a lot of repetition is needed, but at the same time, I don't want to miss any opportunity that might come along.
Yeah.
I agree with Rita. I mean, I'd like to get this, what we've been working on for a
Yeah.
couple of
Oh,
months.
yeah, I'm not
Try-
proposing to
right.
not, to hold this up on that. I'm just saying that those finer things that may be less critical at this point, maybe could be some things we could tweak as we get those standards in place.
I think we have good lighting and a great signage ordinance.
Yes, we
And a
do.
great landscaping ordinance already in place.
Yep.
You know, we've talked about some things, maybe that has to do with the 2.5 feet, but
Yeah.
unless we really see it in action, it's kind of hard to just say, well, let's change it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we've got some good things, and I think we can address the lighting in this transitional area with our existing C1.
Okay.
And then once we get into hopefully someday a formal TCD, then incorporate all their lighting and try to get more of a historical style. So like I said, we can still, in this transitional thing, there's still lighting out there today that meets our ordinance, that still gives a little bit of a
Yeah.
historical
Oh, yeah.
flair.
There's some
Yeah,
flexibility out there.
I'd rather have something in place
Okay.
soon.
Yeah.
And
Me
then
too.
we could
Well,
always
what-
come back to those sections once we have the.
Right.
the-
Well, what we'll do then, I think
Design standard.
y'all have given us good feedback tonight, because I just wanted some further discussion on those topics. But we could put together an ordinance for consideration next time, I think. And I think we could have that.
Go for it.
I have to say, the only thing I'm concerned about is if it's not so much, I like how the building that the bank, I think is beautifully lit, without having to have light posts and all that. But, I like the light fixtures you have that
The lanterns,
yes.
the ones
I
that are wall
think-
mounted lanterns?
Yes,
Okay.
I think we should pay attention to those kinds of light fixtures to make sure there's consistencies of these buildings so that make sure that we're tying that together so that it speaks to
Yeah.
being part of potentially what's going to be our town center. And I guess that's my only concern, is that we make sure that you don't have these kinds of lights here and these kinds of lights here, that there is some consistency and appearance to these lights that are put on these buildings and these transitions, so that it ties it into the,
You know, that's probably, what I'd like to see is maybe more of a historic look to it versus somebody just slapping up there's a lot of modern light fixtures that are great modern light fixtures that are completely eligible for C1, but that's not really
the flavor.
the flavor of what
Yeah.
we're talking about
Yeah.
here. I don't necessarily think they should all match, because I think a true organic downtown area
Yeah.
is different buildings built over a different period of, 20, 30, 40,
Yeah.
50 years. And so, but I do think,
You're talking.
I do
mainly
think, I
about-
agree, I don't think they should be, I think they should be historic.
Yeah.
I don't,
For the
I
wall
can't
light,
figure
you're
out.
talking about all lights or just mainly building lights?
Well, I'm thinking, post lights, Bridgemore used a kind of a historic
Yes.
post light that from a distance looks like more of a traditional lantern, but it has the shields in it to shine down, not out.
Right, yes.
And so I just, you'd hate for somebody to go through and build this great looking brick historic building, if
Yeah.
you will, and then they stick on some modern lighting. You're just like, well, no, wait a second. We're 99% there. We let that one slip through. Am I following? Are we thinking on the same page?
Yeah.
And
It doesn't have to be
And I hate-
matchy, but
Right.
consistent, so that we're making sure that.
I don't know if
that
historic is the right adjective.
Classic or
Classical, historical,
Traditional.
traditional. Maybe
Traditional.
traditional might be a little, might make more sense with what Rita said. Maybe.
Yeah, we'll need to be clear about what we're talking about, so that.
Or really, all the lighting. I mean, you can. I mean, whether it's post
Yeah.
lights or whether it's wall mounted lights. I
So
think
you do want some lighting language in there that ties the lighting to a different standard.
Yeah, you want to have much
Is that what I'm
like
hearing?
shoebox lights and other things.
That's exactly right. Even
Yeah,
though-
I mean, a shoebox light wouldn't be appropriate in, a mixed-use town center probably, which is the typical lights that
I
are
mean,
used.
I hate just to insert one little sentence in there at the lighting, but again, we would also, I personally, I would regret if it slipped through the cracks.
Yeah,
And they ended up
Yeah.
putting some little weird light that looked like ET.
yeah, lighting could be a problem. I think landscaping shouldn't be a problem with their existing ordinance. Signage could be.
The only thing I
Be a
can think
little-
of signage, and I can go both ways, is ground mounted signage. And then I see some incompatibility with a true TCD and ground mounted signage. But then I think about some of the redevelopment potential of some of those parcels and the transition that it is hopefully to a future TCD.
Yeah.
And then I think, well, maybe we shouldn't even mess with it, just leave it alone. We have the square foot maximums and height maximums. And maybe those work pretty good today, and they're pretty restrictive generally compared to other communities, so maybe we shouldn't even mess with it. I mean, again, if there was one area of signage that gave me a little bit of heartburn with that, would probably be the more ground mounted signage in that transitional area. But again, I don't want to prohibit a good
Yeah.
use, somebody that's going to comply with all the architecture and the landscaping and the low impact development practices and all these other things, just because they got to have a ground mounted sign.
Yeah.
And there are definitely some national businesses and corporations and retailers that's the line in the sand for them.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, well, we'll work on the lighting a little bit, see if we can get some language in there so that it's not too open-ended. Anything else on that? We'll try to have something to you next time.
The only comment I might have is if you use one word such as traditional, maybe you can go and elaborate in the definition.
Yeah, we'll have to be clear on what we're talking about if we use terms like historic or traditional or whatever, yeah. And give them, yeah.
Things for different
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll need to be pretty specific about that. Okay, that's very good.
Classic can be.
Public hearing on proposed location of new utilities.
There weren't any that were submitted.
Then the October the 16th, 2014 meeting of the Farragut Municipal Planning Commission is adjourned.